a video cast join. Before I dive into it, I do want to take a couple of seconds to introduce my guest. It's a good friend of mine, and he's the owner, founder of SR Legal, Sandeep Randhawa. Before I dive into more question and stuff with Sandeep, Sandeep is a recognized professional for an industry, has done a lot of real estate work for a lot of time. I don't know the numbers, Sanjeev, but I'm sure there are a lot of real estate transaction which has gone through your page. So welcome to the show. My name is Nabil Khan. The show is Homeowner, and why don't you take a few minutes to introduce yourself, Sandeep?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, Nabil. Thank you for having me. Definitely my pleasure being here today, helping out with any questions or any advice you guys might need, or any help that you might think that people could use at this kind of time. Now, yeah, I've been doing real estate law here for about 7 years now. Closed a few thousand deals at this point, so it's
Wow. Wow.
definitely busy, but that kind of experience definitely help answer some questions.
Yeah.
Deal a lot in the Peel area, GTA as well, but really all over Ontario as our clients require.
Awesome, perfect. So welcome to the show. So for all the audiences, when we're looking here, these are the platform for Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. But when we're looking here, this is the platform for Instagram. So you probably are seeing us looking at both ends. And please message us, let us know if you're able to hear us clearly or if there are any issues which are coming in. Sandeep, we'll dive in. Purpose of having you today, this is a very fast-paced market, and there's a lot happening, especially today. So I want the audience to hear from the industry specialists like you, especially in real estate law. Too many questions people ask us. I'm sure they ask you. So we'll dive into it and we'll try to see how if you can answer many of them. These are the questions people send us. We hear them on a daily basis, and so on and so forth. So let's dive into this, Sandeep. We people ask us this question that we sign quite a few documents at a lawyer's office when we go. So what are those documents?
So definitely varying kinds of documentation, depending on sometimes the lender you have, but for the most part, it should be relatively standard. What you do have as a purchaser who's looking to buy a property or a new property here is that you will probably have some kind of retainer agreement with your lawyer that defines the relationship between both of you. At the same time, your lawyer will have documentation that authorizes the way that some things move. So your property here is going to be transferred. So you'll be acknowledging that transfer is going to be taking place. You'll be acknowledging that mortgages will be registered. At the same time, you'll be authorizing your lawyer to purchase you title insurance. So title insurance and authorizations related to that will be documents that you as well would probably see. And then finally, if you are going to be going forward with a mortgage, typically most people do have a mortgage when they're purchasing. They will have mortgage documentation from the lender that is going to be representing you. So if it's RBC, they will definitely be sending you some documentation, any agreement or loan agreements that they want you to sign. And your lawyer will help you go through that as well. Now, if you're a first-time home buyer, there may also be some documents for that. But for the most part, it's a lot of authorizations for your lawyer to be able to either move the funds, move the title of the property, or move the mortgage. So a lot of those authorizations for that. And then title insurance is also another one that you'll see.
Perfect. So very well explained, because quite frankly, the way you explained it is very well done. Because even when I've gone to real estate firms or the lawyer office, I've signed so many documents, and I technically what you're saying is we are providing the authority for you to work on our behalf, technically with the mortgage industry, with the lawyers, with the title insurance, and something along those lines. I think that's what you're saying. So I mean, very well explained. Because honestly, I've gone quite a few properties in my life, and I've signed those documents. I've always like, why are these documents and what am I signing? So thank you, sir. I know now people have understood that these are the authorities we are giving to the law office. So you touch base about, sorry, you want to say something?
No, I was going to say at the same time also because it's sometimes glazed over, but the lawyer is technically representing. If you are one buyer, then one buyer. If you're two buyers, then jointly two buyers. And at the same time is also representing the bank, because the bank is going to be sending instructions to the lawyer So for us to be able to operate in that way, we do require you to authorize that relationship as well.
Very nice, very nice. Perfect. Well, thanks for explaining. So, the audience on all the platforms must have heard that this is where we are signing all those documents with the lawyers because they are authorizing a lot of different things. You talked about title insurance. So, I know and you know what a title insurance is, but let's talk to a normal individual who's buying the home for the first time. What is title insurance?
That's a good question. So, insurance typically is coverage in case some situation were to arise. If you were to have homeowners insurance, if you're in a condo, your condo has building insurance, typically to protect the structure. So, if you have homeowners insurance, it's going to probably be to protect the physical structure, fire, flooding, whatever your policy covers. When it comes to title insurance, it's the piece of paper at the land registry office that has your name on it that you do want to protect. So, referred to as the title, the deed, the ownership of your property. And as I mentioned, this is just a document at the land registry office, depending on where your property is. So, title insurance is protection over that piece of paper. And what title insurance as a general thought process is to cover is a title issue arising that is not caused typically by the owner themselves. So sometimes you have a seller who maybe hasn't paid their property taxes in full. A property transfer happens, and you now have tax arrears on the property. Tax arrears, or utility arrears, water arrears. These can all form liens on your property, and the title insurance would be there to protect it. Now, additionally, any fraudulent liens that were to arise on your property would essentially also be covered by title insurance, as long as you didn't cause them in any way. So when you hear things like mortgage fraud, and you hear about stuff like that, to protect the actual ownership and title of your property, you would want to have a title insurance coverage. And finally, it does also deal with any survey related issues. So essentially, properties should look as they do on a survey. A lot of times, we're not able to obtain a survey in a transaction. So survey related issues may also be covered by title insurance.
So, question I have from Sukhmeet is: does title insurance happens when client buy property from builder? So
So
does
title insurance would typically happen in any transaction besides a sale of a property. So if you are purchasing a property, new or resale, or you are you're obtaining a new mortgage, you would probably require a title insurance policy. Now, there is the opportunity for something like a lawyer's opinion to be used instead of title insurance, but it's not recommended. The reason that we recommend the title insurance policy is that when we give our opinion, as good as it might be, um, it's only valid the day we give it. Anything that were to arise on the title on a future date would probably not be covered by our opinion, because there would be no way for us to realize that. So title insurance is used in most purchase transactions. I'm going to say it's pretty much been used in every transaction I've done.
right?
There are two components to the policy: an owner policy and a lender policy, typically for your mortgage. And then beyond that, just so you understand the cost, title insurance is typically based on the purchase price of the property. So, as a rule of thumb, we like to tell clients that title insurance is about as many hundreds of dollars as your property is hundreds of thousands of dollars. So if you're looking at a $900,000 property, you're
Right.
looking at about a $900 title insurance policy.
Oh, okay. Okay.
$2 million property, you're looking at about a $2,000 title insurance policy.
So, Sandeep, a question: is it mandatory to get title insurance?
So to answer your question, it's not mandatory. You can
Right.
opt for the lawyer's opinion.
Right.
However, we do covet our opinion,
Yeah.
and to take the time to write it out and actually give it, it
Yeah.
might even be more costly than your title insurance policy, number one.
Right.
And number two, it doesn't offer the coverage that title insurance does. So you are better protected from title insurance rather than the opinion of a solicitor.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Reza. Thank you so much. Yes, we're trying to give the information, and we have a specialist today. So, Sandeep, a question for you is, what if we cannot close the transaction? Now, imagine we have waived the conditions and everything is waived. What if, as a buyer, we're not able to close the transaction? What are the ramifications?
That's a good question. Now, unfortunately, that's a difficult situation once your conditional periods are over, and it would be considered a default of your obligations here, right? So,
Yeah.
if as the purchaser you default on your obligations, you could be liable here for damages that are related to that. So, any possible deficit in the purchase price, if the seller has to resell that property at a lower value, there may be some costs that are associated with that, maybe additional real estate costs, additional, fees for the realtors themselves, anything like that, even marketing the property again, whatever mechanism they use, staging, etc. Right? So all of this can be costs that may be attributable to the would-be purchaser in the situation. So,
Well, there you go. Sorry to come here. There's a compliment for you. I want to make sure it's been recognized. I mean, Reza has used in past, and he's saying you're a great lawyer. One of his friends has used him. Very happy. Good job. Sorry to cut you off. I just want to make
no,
sure
no, no, thank you very
people
much.
do
I
deserve.
appreciate
Okay.
that, and always happy to help. But yeah, no, you want to be careful. Now, the important thing is that there definitely can be some negotiation done at the time. So, if in case a client does default on the day of closing and they're not able to close, then it is important that the solicitor is in a position where they can try to negotiate maybe an extension.
Right.
Maybe there's another opportunity here to close in a different mechanism, right? And
Yeah.
then if that's not the case, then maybe you can come to some kind of settlement
Right.
with that seller and deal with it that way. But hopefully, we can all close our deals and
Well, so, yeah. So the key thing here is what I'm hearing is, folks, just please make sure stay close to your lawyer if there are any challenges you're facing, because if you're coming to 11th hour where a deal cannot close, there can be a lot of ramifications. There can be a lot of things which can come in. Nobody wants to be there. I'm sure, Sandeep, you don't want to be there as a representative. There's a lot of things can come. So, everyone, my advice is please stay close to a lawyer, and Sandeep is a great one here.
thank
Um,
you. And,
yeah.
not to cut you off at all. I just wanted to say that we've had situations in the past where a client was told that the builder would not extend the deal. There was no possibility for extension, and they said that they would sell the property to somebody else. And this was a builder, so sometimes their lawyers are a little more difficult, more aggressive. Their clients are more aggressive as builders. So, if in case you run into a situation like that, we had one where they absolutely said they wouldn't close, and we were able to still close that deal. So uh,
Awesome.
you might need that. Never know
Yeah.
when you do.
Perfect. Okay, question from Ruby.
Yeah.
Let's say if they have property line issues after they bought the house, will title insurance will cover? If survey needed, who will cover the survey cost?
So the inclusions and exclusions of your title insurance policy should be reviewed with your lawyer. However, the main kind of ingredient here is that your knowledge of this situation should be non-existent. You wouldn't know at the time that you're purchasing that there is a property line issue. Now, if it were to come up afterwards and there was no survey available, and no mechanism for you to really realize this, then yeah, there is an inclination that title insurance will look into that and rectify that for the client. Now, if I can see the rest of this question, if a survey is needed, a lot of times in the agreements, the way that you have the realtor structure it is typically that the seller agrees to provide a survey if one were to be available. Now, if there's not one available, that leaves the seller's obligation out of it. So typically, your lawyer should also, have that survey with them and then be able to review that with you. If you get a copy of it, a lot of times sellers are able to supply it, but if they're not, the cost of a survey can be kind of high. You're looking at, potentially even over $1,000 to have a surveyor
Mm,
out there and
wow.
actually chalk out a survey for you.
Wow, wow. So this is a good question, Ruby. Thanks for asking, and Sandeep, thanks for asking. So thanks for answering. So
For
there could
sure.
be a lot of cost here involved. So I think have a detailed Ruby reach out to Sandeep or Lori. But I think it's good to have a really detailed conversation here. This is a short time, but I think I really want all of my real estate agents and my friends who are also looking at it. Let's dive down more into this, and because there's more to this question. Thanks, Ruby, for asking.
For sure.
Reza has a question. Have you seen a situation where builders are not putting a cap for levies and charging people crazy amounts at closing, which is the follow up? So let me finish. Sorry, Sunny, let me read this question. There comes in a few
By all
parts.
means.
Part B is, have you seen builder putting in something about extra charges for increase in prices for the material change?
So we'll go in order of the way that it was asked. When it comes towards or for the development levies, a lot of times builder agreement, or at least, they're lengthy, they're difficult to go through, but it is recommended that you go through one with a solicitor. There are some key things that you want to be aware of. My recommendation is always for our clients, and our realtors as well, to review the adjustments section of the agreement. So in the adjustments section, you typically have the potential cost and adjustments that will be made to the purchase price. And a lot of times at that point, they will mention something like educational levies, development charges, park levies, etc. Now, builders have become crafty in the way that they maybe say this. The builders don't necessarily tell you the amount. Sometimes they do. However, yes, I have seen situations where if at the time you enter into that agreement with the builder, you did not cap those levies, that you do potentially have a situation on the final closing where the builder ends up, charging you something that does not even make sense when it comes to development levies. And it's been a little bit of time. But I one time had a client who had not reviewed their agreement with the solicitor, but we ended up getting their agreement at a later date, and they were looking to close with our office. At that point, we communicated with the builder's lawyer and received a document known as a statement of adjustments. And for a $230,000 condo in Waterloo, the builder had something like $30,000 in charges. And
Oh wow, $30,000.
yeah, it was almost 10% of, or more than 10% of the cost of the condo. So
Wow.
it was extreme. And there was really nothing to be done about it because when they entered into the agreement, they never capped it. Now, uh, to the second part of the question, when it comes to the new materials portion and the builder saying, it's become very expensive for us to construct this unit in the same way that, we agreed to at a previous date. Unfortunately, they're not coming out with legislation strong enough to be able to deal with something like this. And you'll
Wow.
see, actually, a discussion today that I was listening to on AM 640. Um, the builders may be facing a penalty of $50,000 to $100,000 for canceling these deals because they, want to relist the properties at a higher price, or some form of extortion where they tell you, look, you got to put $100,000 or $150,000 more, or we won't be able to build this property as we agreed to. Now, unfortunately, the government hasn't made any strides strong enough to go against these builders and to actually legislate something in that benefit. Unfortunately, that is something that can happen at this point. Builders have agreements with people under umbrella companies and companies that they just open for the purpose of construction. So,
Right.
you know, maybe not to, just to use an example, not to badmouth any builder, but, say you have a builder, for example, XYZ company
Yeah.
does something in Ontario.
Yeah.
They will open up a company called XYZ,
Right.
Burlington.
Right.
And if in case they do that, they're two separate companies. So you are probably entering into a deal with XYZ Burlington, but the real parent company is XYZ,
Right.
and the only one that you ever contract with is the sub company. And
Right.
because of that, you really won't have any recourse when that company backs out and decides not to build the property. So there are
Wow.
issues with builders increasing these costs, and unfortunately, at this point, there's really not too much for the consumer to do.
And you know what? I think this is where the key point comes in. I see a lot of, so I'm, as you, Sandeep, we see a lot of clients on a daily basis. People just get excited and buy the home. Hold on one second. Go through every single thing as you just mentioned. Read the papers, read the builder adjustments. We have amazing realtors watching. They're phenomenal realtors who are on Facebook and Instagram watching us. They're amazing. They have all the paperwork. They have all the knowledge in the industry. Just work with them. And when they're asking you, some things, then ask these questions. What if the builders, as I just pointed out there, that happened? What if Ruby, as the Ruby said, what if there's a survey? So ask these questions. Ask your realtor these questions. Ask your mortgage guy this question. Ask your lawyer this question. So thanks for the question, folks. I'm going to move on to the second question, which is also another interesting one. Um, what should a customer avoid when they're looking for a lawyer?
Avoid when they're looking for a lawyer.
Yeah, I mean it's a tough question. It's a funny. A very good friend of mine sent me. Her name is Rukaya. She sent me this to ask you that.
Yeah.
Or I think the right way of rewording is what should a customer look for when they're looking for a lawyer? So,
Either one is good.
yeah,
If I were to say what to avoid,
yeah,
typically you want to have a lawyer who does specialize in real estate.
right,
It's always going to be a benefit to you if, in case situation were to arise, you want somebody
right,
who's experienced with it. So my recommendation would be to pick a real estate lawyer.
yeah,
Specifically, you don't want to go to a personal injury office when you have a real
yeah,
estate closing. So definitely you want to deal with somebody like that. Um, Beyond that, you want to deal with somebody who seems confident about the process. If you
right,
ask questions, their answers should be very quick. It's not a very difficult process in terms of
right,
actually walking through it.
right,
However, when a situation arises, you want somebody who can confidently deal with it. And as somebody who has practiced litigation to a degree, my recommendation is always going to be to side with a lawyer who may have a litigation practice as well, or
right,
have some kind of litigation experience, because at the end of the day, you are entering into agreements and contracts. And as you do so, if in case something were to go south, having a lawyer with some litigation experience or some idea of litigation is always going to be beneficial as you try to walk or negotiate through any tough waters.
Yeah, it's so rightly put it together, because now when you were saying, I was thinking the same thing. When we're buying a home, there's an amazing real estate agent involved. There's a mortgage individual, appraiser, the lawyer. The legal part has been taken by the lawyer. I mean, I
Yeah.
can do a mortgage. I can, real estate agent can do amazing work, but the legality of the business, it all comes down to you. So a lot of time when I talk to the customers, they just want to quickly go to a lawyer, sign the documents, get the keys. Hold on one second. Hold
Yeah.
on. This is the legal. This is one of the most important part is legality. This is something which will keep you out of trouble. You talked about title insurance. You talked about surveys. You talked about, the representative from the mortgage side. You talked about working with the city. So there's so many things. But I mean, I tell you, Sandeep, when I bought my first home a few years ago, all I care about when I walked into the law office, this is again me 10 years ago, sign, 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 sign. Okay, where's the key and how much I'm paying you,
Yeah.
right? But so I don't want people to do the same thing. Just get the information and sit down and spend a good amount of time with the individual. So bringing it to a home, Sanjeev. Probably the closing time. You have a lot of questions folks have asked. I think this is the last question. People have kind of said the similar. You kind of answered that, but I'll say it again. This is the appraisal market where appraisals are sometimes not coming to the value, right? So now let's say if I waive the condition of a property, appraisal did not come out. That's not my fault. Appraisal did not come to the value. I don't have extra $100,000 to close the transaction. I don't close that transaction. Am I in trouble? for not closing it, even though it's not my fault. The appraisal did not come to what I was looking for.
So at the 2017 mark, this was a big issue that arose pretty much around April 2017.
Right.
There was new foreign buyer legislation that came out, and when that did, a lot of people who had entered into agreements of purchase and sale prior to April 2017 really felt the impact of low appraisals come May, June, July of 2017. And if our current market is any indicator, this is potentially something that can happen as we go forward into 2022 and 2023.
Mm,
So, yes, essentially, when a bank does commit to give you a mortgage, they do so on the basis that they get to run an appraisal and they get to value that property. And if that property does meet that appraisal requirement that the bank has, or the value oriented assessment the bank is looking for, then you do have a situation where the bank will go forward and approve your mortgage. Now, that's just one of the conditions. And typically, the bank is not going to give you the funds for your deal unless you're in a position where you are able to fulfill all their conditions. So, if you're unable to fulfill those conditions, then you may potentially be looking at a situation where you're going to default. And
mm.
if you default, you may be liable for any damages, as I mentioned before,
Yeah.
that are related to that. So it is extremely, extremely dangerous situation for a lot of people.
It's a key. It's a key point you make because today there was a big noise in the industry about 50 basis points, and
Yeah,
recently and so on. So I want everybody to think: what if the appraisals are a little bit lower? So if you have waived the condition, and if the appraisal are not coming from what you're thinking, you are liable to close that transaction. So you
that's
cannot
right.
make that excuse to the seller or the mortgage company that, oh, I can't close because the that's not an excuse you can make. So you better be ready if the appraisal is not coming, or look for a lender who can appraise you for the value. So that's pretty good for me, Sandeep. I can't believe it's in 30 minutes. And talking about, we thought we'll probably do 10, 15, but I think your
It's not
knowledge is
all you want. Yeah.
amazing. So why don't you just bring us home, take a couple of minutes to close? Anything you want to mention to the customers or the real estate agents or the mortgage individuals to look for in closing?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I do recommend to everybody, and I know that people see the fine print and they see the small writing in these agreements and they don't read them, or they skim over them. But there is a lot of information in those agreements, and especially the portions where you're adding conditions or clauses to the agreement should be very carefully reviewed, because they are typically for the benefit of one party or the other. So you want to understand what's going on there.
Mm,
And when it comes to any situation, I know that this was kind of a component of our discussion. If in case you are looking at a situation where you are potentially going to default, navigating and being able to navigate out of that situation is extremely important. And I know
mm,
sometimes it's even as scary as forfeiting full deposits and even more money, but sometimes it's better to resolve that situation rather than to let it go into court and to
right.
have to argue over that
Mm,
situation. So you want to make sure you completely understand what it is you are signing up for. This is the
mm,
biggest purchase you'll probably ever make,
right.
and that involves reading it and not just
Mm.
flipping through the pages and signing. So
Yes, I made the mistake when I was a kid. But thank you, Sandeep, and thank you for all the listeners on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Thank you so much for your questions. Everybody who have asked amazing questions. Sandeep, thank you so much for joining. I know it's after hours for yourself as
no,
well.
thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, and I hope the information can be out there to the community. Thank you so much for joining. Thank
That
you
was
for
very
listening,
helpful.
everybody. Have yourself a great day. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Bye.